Lübeck, 1143. A town taking root on the banks of the Trav, a humble beginning for what would become a linchpin of Baltic trade. Opportunity and peril danced in equal measure as merchants sought their fortunes. Gerhard, a merchant from Cologne, had come to Lübeck seeking opportunity. The Baltic trade, though fraught with risk, promised riches beyond imagination. Furs, timber, and grain were the currencies of this new frontier. The dangers were real. Wends harassed ships along the coast and outright pirates, emboldened by the lack of centralized authority, grew bolder. The need for protection became increasingly clear. Else, daughter of a prominent Lübeck merchant, understood the stakes. Fortunes were made and lost on the whims of the sea and the honesty of foreign traders. Her family's livelihood depended on the safe passage of their ships. A merchant convoy is ambushed by Wendish pirates. The pirates, agile and ruthless, swarm the slower merchant vessels. The clash of steel echoes across the waves. Gerhard saw the solution: strength in numbers. He rallied fellow merchants, urging them to pool their resources and form a guild to protect their interests. The initial focus was simple: coordinated defense and standardized trade practices. By working together, they could negotiate better terms and deter pirates. Unbeknownst to the merchants, their efforts drew the attention of less scrupulous individuals. Pirates like Klaus Störtebeker, a scourge of the Baltic, saw the burgeoning trade as a tempting target. The merchants erected fortifications at key trading posts and began to arm their ships. Slowly but surely, they began to assert their dominance over the Baltic. Wise elders, like former Mayor Johann Wittenborg, lent their experience and guidance to the fledgling merchant alliance, shaping its policies and solidifying its foundations. Overland routes, though dangerous, complemented the sea lanes, connecting Lübeck to the wider world. Caravans laden with goods traversed treacherous paths, braving bandits and territorial disputes. The Hanseatic League was not yet born, but the seeds had been sown. The spirit of cooperation, the lure of profit, and the necessity of defense were forging an alliance that would shape the destiny of Northern Europe for centuries to come. The seeds of cooperation, once scattered, began to sprout into a unified force. Cities, recognizing their shared vulnerabilities and mutual ambitions, edged closer, drawn together by the promise of collective strength. In Bruges, Gerhard von Köln, contour master, meticulously pored over accounts. He saw the potential, the reduction in losses from piracy as more ships sailed together, the increased bargaining power when negotiating with local lords. Else Schmidt, daughter of a prominent Lübeck merchant, watched the transformation unfold from her privileged perch. She overheard discussions of treaties, alliances, and the audacious notion of a league that would challenge even kings. In Lübeck, representatives from Lübeck, Hamburg, and Bremen convened. Each city, fiercely independent, sought to protect its interests, but the allure of collective security and amplified profits proved irresistible. Johann Wittenborg, the elder statesman of Lübeck, counseled patience and foresight. A league, he declared, is only as strong as its weakest link. We must forge common laws, standardize weights and measures, and act as one in the face of adversity. Agreements were painstakingly drafted, debated, and ratified. Common laws regarding trade practices, ship construction, and dispute resolution were established. The foundation of the Hanseatic League was being laid, brick by painstaking brick. On the Baltic, Hanseatic cogs began sailing in greater numbers, their flags now displaying not just the symbols of individual cities, but also the shared emblem of the League. A message to all. These ships sailed under the protection of a unified power. In Bruges, Gerhardt leveraged the growing influence of the League. He negotiated favorable terms with Flemish weavers, securing access to vital markets for Hanseatic goods. The League's reputation preceded him, a shield and a sword in his hand. Else listened to the hushed tones of merchants discussing the League's expanding reach, its ability to dictate terms, its increasing wealth. A sense of both excitement and unease stirred within her. Power, she knew, always came at a price. Unbeknownst to the merchants of the League, Klaus Störtebeker watched from the shadows. The growing wealth of the Hanseatic League was a tempting target, and he and his Vittel brothers were always on the lookout for opportunity. Slowly but surely, more cities joined the alliance, drawn to the promise of shared prosperity and security. From the Netherlands to Poland, the Hanseatic League's influence spread, a network of commerce and cooperation that began to reshape the map of Northern Europe. Johann Wittenborg, standing on the docks of Lübeck, surveyed the bustling harbor. The League had been forged, but the challenges were only beginning. Maintaining unity, navigating rivalries, and defending their interests would demand constant vigilance and unwavering resolve. The lords of the sea had risen, but their reign was far from secure. The 13th century dawned, and the Hanseatic League, though still a nascent entity, began to exert its influence over the Baltic Sea. The cogs, those sturdy, round-hulled vessels, became the lifeblood of this burgeoning network, connecting distant cities and facilitating an unprecedented flow of goods. Lübeck, strategically positioned on the Trave River, solidified its position as the League's unofficial capital. Its warehouses swelled with the bounty of the Baltic, herring, grain, timber, furs, and more, transforming the once modest town into a vibrant center of commerce. In Bruges, Gerhard von Köln, the contour master, ensured the smooth operation of the Hanseatic trade post. He meticulously oversaw the exchange of goods, from Flemish cloth to Baltic grain, solidifying the League's presence in the vital Flemish market. Across the North Sea, the Steelyard in London served as the League's gateway to England. Hanseatic merchants traded furs, timber, and other Baltic goods for English wool and manufactured goods, creating a vital link between East and West. To protect their valuable trade routes, the Hanseatic League developed a formidable naval presence. Convoys of armed cogs patrolled the Baltic, deterring pirates and rival powers from interfering with their commerce. But the Baltic was not without its perils. Pirates like the infamous Klaus Störtebeker preyed on Hanseatic ships, disrupting trade and threatening the League's dominance. Störtebeker, a scourge of the sea, became a symbol of the challenges facing the Hanseatic League. Skirmishes between Hanseatic ships and pirates became increasingly frequent. The League's naval strength was tested as they fought to protect their trade routes from these maritime predators. The battles were brutal, with high stakes for both sides. In Lübeck, Johann Wittenborg, a respected elder and former mayor, advised the League on matters of trade and defense. He understood the importance of maintaining a strong navy and forging alliances to protect their interests. Gerhard von Köln skillfully negotiated trade agreements with Flemish merchants, ensuring favorable terms for the Hanseatic League. He understood the delicate balance of power and the importance of diplomacy in maintaining their economic dominance. The Hanseatic League's control over vital commodities like grain allowed them to wield significant influence over cities and regions. They could provide much-needed supplies during times of famine or hardship, solidifying their power and fostering loyalty. Else Schmidt, daughter of a wealthy Lübeck merchant, traveled to the steelyard to observe the Hanseatic trade firsthand. She witnessed the power and influence of the League, and the intricate web of commerce that connected cities across the Baltic and beyond. By the late 13th century, the Hanseatic League had firmly established its dominion over the Baltic Sea. Its network of cities, its powerful navy, and its control over vital commodities had transformed the region into a thriving center of trade and commerce. But challenges loomed on the horizon, as rival powers began to challenge the League's dominance. Bruges, a vibrant hub in Flanders, served as a crucial contour for the Hanseatic League, connecting the Baltic trade with the markets of Western Europe. The air hummed with the shouts of dockworkers, the creak of ropes, and the cacophony of merchants haggling over prices. Back in Lübeck, the daughters of merchants like Else Schmidt were not merely ornaments. They were often educated in the family business, learning accounting and trade practices that would serve them well in managing their households and potentially even contributing to the League's operations. Gerhard von Köln, the contour master, understood the lifeblood of the League flowed through its accounting. Precise records were kept of every transaction, from the weight of the wax to the quality of the wool, ensuring fair dealings and maximizing profits. Across the sea in London, the steelyard, the Hanseatic contour, stood as a walled city within a city. Here, Hanseatic merchants enjoyed special privileges, trading directly with English merchants and controlling the flow of goods in and out of the realm. Further north in Bergen, Norway, the Hanseatic League established a dominant presence in the trade of dried cod, a staple food across Europe. The stockfish, as it was known, was carefully graded and packed for shipment, its quality ensuring the League's continued control of the market. Eastward in Novgorod, the Hanseatic merchants braved the harsh winters to trade for furs, wax, and other valuable commodities from the Russian interior. The contour in Novgorod was a crucial link between East and West, despite the challenges of navigating the vast distances and cultural differences. The Hanseatic League pioneered sophisticated credit systems, enabling long-distance trade and minimizing the risks associated with transporting large sums of money. Bills of exchange and letters of credit became essential tools of their trade, fostering trust and facilitating transactions across vast distances. In Lübeck, the League's central accounting office meticulously tracked the flow of goods and capital across the network of contours. This centralized system allowed for efficient resource allocation and the identification of potential risks and opportunities. But the League's success attracted unwanted attention. Pirates like Klaus Störtebeker preyed on Hanseatic ships, disrupting trade and threatening the League's dominance of the Baltic. The cost of protecting their trade routes began to rise significantly. Johann Wittenborg, a respected elder and former mayor of Lübeck, cautioned against complacency. "The sea gives, but it also takes," he warned. "We must be vigilant in protecting our interests, lest we lose all that we have gained." The Hanseatic League faced increasing competition from other trading nations, particularly the English, who sought to break the League's monopoly. Gerhard von Köln and other contour masters found themselves in constant negotiation to maintain favorable trading terms. The contours of the Hanseatic League were more than just trading posts. They were outposts of Hanseatic power, centers of cultural exchange, and vital links in a complex network that connected the Baltic world with the markets of Europe and beyond. The success of this network depended on efficient management, sophisticated financial systems, and the unwavering determination of the Hanseatic merchants. The Baltic Sea, lifeline of the Hanseatic League, had become a perilous place. While merchants dreamed of profit, pirates dreamt of plunder. The cogs, though sturdy, were vulnerable to the swift and ruthless attacks of those who sailed under the black flag. Among these sea wolves, Klaus Stortebeker was the most feared. A master of hit-and-run tactics, Stortebeker and his Victual brothers terrorized the Baltic, disrupting trade and leaving a trail of wrecked ships and broken lives in their wake. In Bruges, Gerhard von Köln, contour master, wrestled with the growing problem of piracy. Each raid meant lost goods, delayed shipments, and rising insurance costs. The League's merchants demanded action. In Lübeck, Johann Wittenborg, elder statesman and former mayor, addressed the council. "The pirates' brazen attacks threaten the very foundation of our League," he declared. "We must meet force with force." The League responded by arming its ships and organizing convoys. Cogs, once symbols of trade, were now bristling with cannons, ready to defend themselves and their precious cargo. Stortebeker, ever bold, was undeterred. He saw the Hanseatic fleet as a challenge, a chance for even greater spoils. The battle was joined. Cannons roared, sending iron balls crashing into hulls. Pirates swarmed aboard Hanseatic ships, their cutlasses dripping with blood. The Hanseatic sailors fought back with grim determination, defending their ships and their livelihoods. Stortebeker, a whirlwind of fury, cut down any who dared to stand in his path. But the Hanseatic forces were too strong, their ships too well defended. The battle ended with a costly victory for the Hanseatic League. Several ships were lost or damaged, and many sailors lay dead or wounded. But Stortebeker was driven off, his fleet scattered. The victory was bittersweet. In Lübeck, Else Schmidt, daughter of a wealthy merchant, prayed for her brother, who sailed with the fleet. The human cost of the conflict weighed heavily on the city. In Bruges, Gerhard oversaw the repairs, counting the losses and planning the next convoy. The League had survived, but the threat of piracy remained a constant shadow over their trade routes. The Baltic, once again, belonged to the merchants of the Hanseatic League, but they knew that Stortebeker and his brethren were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike again. The League's fight for dominance was far from over. The League's influence extended beyond mere trade. It became a political force, capable of influencing the rulers of surrounding kingdoms. Johann Wittenborg, a veteran of Lübeck's political battles, understood this power intimately. Else Schmidt, though young, possessed a keen intellect and an understanding of her family's stake in the League's success. She sought to understand the nuances of their political maneuvering. "This letter," Johann explained, "concerns the King of Denmark. He seeks our support in his war against Norway, a tempting offer but fraught with risk." In Bruges, Gerhard von Köln weighed the potential consequences of the League's political entanglements. War disrupted trade, but supporting the right side could bring immense rewards. The League's involvement in these conflicts often created opportunities for their enemies. Klaus Stortebeker and his Victual brothers thrived in the chaos, preying on both sides. The League often found itself embroiled in open warfare, defending its trade routes and interests against rival powers. Naval battles were a common occurrence in the Baltic. The League also served as a mediator in regional conflicts, using its economic power to influence negotiations and maintain peace. Johann Wittenborg, with his years of experience, was often called upon to arbitrate disputes. Gerhard, in Bruges, navigated the treacherous waters of international diplomacy. Maintaining good relations with England was crucial for the flow of goods to the steelyard in London. Else, delving deeper into the League's affairs, discovered a potential crisis brewing in Novgorod. Political instability there threatened the vital fur trade. The League's representatives, backed by their collective economic might, were not afraid to exert pressure on rulers who threatened their interests. Johann, ever the statesman, reminded the citizens of Lübeck that the League's strength lay in its unity and its commitment to common goals. The Hanseatic League, through its political maneuvering, its economic might, and its occasional use of force, had carved out a powerful sphere of influence in the medieval world. But the tides of fortune were ever changing, and new challenges loomed on the horizon. The seeds of the Hanseatic League's dominance, once so carefully sown, began to face new storms. The very structure that had brought prosperity was now straining under its own weight, creaking with internal pressures and external threats. In Lübeck, Else Schmidt watched the shifting tides with growing apprehension. The harmony that once characterized the merchant families was fracturing, replaced by whispers of discontent and ambition. Competition for resources intensified, pitting city against city. Lübeck and Hamburg, once staunch allies, found themselves embroiled in a bitter dispute over control of vital trade routes. In Bruges, Gerhard von Köln struggled to maintain order amidst the rising tensions. He received reports of unfair practices, of cities hoarding resources and undermining the collective good. The flow of trade, once the lifeblood of the League, began to stagnate. Discontent spread among the workers, slowing down the movement of goods and disrupting the established order. The pirates, emboldened by the League's internal struggles, grew increasingly daring. Klaus Störtebeker and his Vittel brothers wreaked havoc on Hanseatic ships, further disrupting trade and eroding confidence. England, sensing the League's weakness, began to challenge its dominance in the North Sea. English ships blockaded Hanseatic ports, disrupting trade and asserting their own power. In Lübeck, Johann Wittenborg addressed the council, his voice filled with concern. "The League is fracturing," he warned. "If we do not act decisively, we risk losing everything we have built." New trade routes emerged, bypassing Hanseatic cities and diminishing their control over key commodities. Other European powers established their own trading posts, further eroding the League's monopoly. Else overheard hushed conversations, whispers of financial losses and uncertain futures. The foundations of her family's wealth, once so secure, seemed to be crumbling beneath her feet. In Bruges, Gerhard penned a somber letter to Lübeck, detailing the League's decline. He spoke of the urgent need for reform, for a return to the principles of unity and cooperation. The Hanseatic League, once a beacon of economic power, faced a perilous storm. Its future hung in the balance, dependent on its ability to overcome internal divisions and adapt to a changing world. The late 15th century brought a chill wind to the Hanseatic League. The era of unchallenged dominance was drawing to a close, and the rising power of nation-states like England and Denmark cast a long shadow. In Lübeck, Johann Wittenborg and the League's elders grappled with the changing tides. The old certainties were crumbling, and new strategies were desperately needed. The League's naval power, once unmatched, suffered a series of humiliating defeats. Danish warships, emboldened by their king's ambition, challenged Hanseatic control of the Baltic. In Bruges, Gerhard von Köln fought a rearguard action, struggling to maintain the League's influence against the rising tide of English and Flemish merchants. Even in Lübeck, hope mingled with apprehension. Else Schmidt, daughter of a wealthy merchant, prayed for the League's survival, sensing the growing uncertainty. The pirates, emboldened by the League's weakness, grew bolder. Klaus Störtebeker and his Victual brothers preyed on Hanseatic ships with impunity, further disrupting trade. The Steelyard in London, once a symbol of Hanseatic power, faced increasing challenges from English competitors. Gerhardt argued fiercely to protect the League's privileges, but his efforts were often in vain. In Lubeck, Johann Wittenborg warned the Hanseatic Council of the dangers ahead. Internal divisions and a lack of unity further weakened the League's position. The discovery of new trade routes to the south and the exploration of the Americas shifted the economic center of gravity away from the Baltic Sea. The League's traditional dominance was undermined by these global changes. One by one, the League's contours were closed. The Bruges office, once a bustling hub of trade, fell silent, a victim of the changing times. Gerhardt watched with a heavy heart. Johann Wittenborg, nearing the end of his life, reflected on the League's rise and fall. The dream of a unified trading empire had faded, leaving behind a legacy of both achievement and failure. Though the Hanseatic League's power waned, its impact on the cities it controlled remained. Lübeck, once the proud capital of a trading empire, stood as a reminder of a bygone era, a testament to the rise and fall of economic power. The year is 1669. The grand edifice of the Hanseatic League, once a beacon of economic power, now crumbles. The final diet convenes in Lübeck, a mere formality to acknowledge what has long been evident. The League's time has passed. Johann Wittenborg, now long past his days as mayor, reflects on the League's trajectory. He remembers the bustling markets, the powerful cogs, and the influence that once resonated across Europe. The decline, he knows, was not a sudden event, but a slow erosion. The rise of nation-states proved to be a fatal blow. Powerful kingdoms like England and the Netherlands, with their own ambitious trading companies, challenged the League's dominance. Trade routes shifted, bypassing the Baltic and diminishing the League's control over essential commodities. The age of exploration brought new opportunities, but the Hanseatic League, focused on its traditional Baltic routes, failed to adapt. The Dutch and English East India Companies seized the initiative, establishing lucrative trade networks that dwarfed the League's operations. Internal divisions further weakened the League. The individual cities, once united by common interests, increasingly pursued their own agendas. Competition and mistrust replaced cooperation, undermining the League's collective strength. Even the once thriving contours, like the one in Bruges, felt the decline. Gerhard von Köln witnesses firsthand the dwindling trade and the exodus of merchants seeking better opportunities elsewhere. The Steelyard, once a symbol of Hanseatic power in London, is now a shadow of its former self. The English crown, no longer reliant on the League, asserts its control and restricts Hanseatic privileges. Else Schmidt, now a woman of middle age, observes the changes in her native Lübeck. The grand trading houses of her youth are repurposed, and the city adapts to a new economic reality. Even the threat of piracy, once a constant menace, fades into memory. The exploits of Klaus Störtebeker become the stuff of legend, a reminder of the dangers that once defined the Baltic Sea. Johann Wittenborg, in his twilight years, understands that the League's dissolution does not erase its impact. Its legacy endures in the cities it shaped, the trade practices it pioneered, and the spirit of cooperation it fostered. The Hanseatic League may be gone, but its influence remains visible. The cities that once formed its core continue to thrive as centers of trade and commerce, testaments to the League's enduring impact. The spirit of the Hanseatic League lives on in modern international collaborations. The principles of free trade, mutual support, and collective action, once championed by the League, continue to shape the world's economic landscape, a legacy forged in the Baltic, echoing through the centuries.